opportunity to do something like this, believe it or not, and I think someone somewhere is thinking about these things. I actually had a chance to do the kickoff speech for the United Way campaign in Los Angeles, California, and that was a very unusual opportunity. My goal this morning is to pick up a little bit on one thing that Michael mentioned, is that the problems we have are very complex in the U.S. economy. And I would just like to illustrate the complexity of what some of the issues are we're dealing with. Clearly, right now, we have an economic recovery in the United States economy. Growth is there, output is going up. We see a lot more consumer spending, we see more investment spending, we certainly see more infrastructure spending, especially at the federal government level. But we also see a very unusual situation where clearly this, at least for now, will be a jobless recovery. And I think one of the great challenges we have in both the national economy and in North Carolina and in Charlotte is we don't have the jobs that go with the recovery. And the jobs that we are seeing are very different than what we've experienced over the last 30 or 40 years. So I think there's a very complex challenge here in terms of how do we deal with the growth with very, very few jobs. What I'd like to emphasize is that when I look at the job situation, when you look at the job situation, and I think when anyone in this region looks at the job situation, we notice two different stories going on. First, clearly we are losing. We will probably continue to lose manufacturing jobs in the U.S. economy and in Charlotte as well, in North Carolina especially, because we've been losing manufacturing jobs since 1979. Not only that, but even more specifically, what's a greater challenge to our community and some of the surrounding communities is that what we see is we're losing a lot of low and semi-skilled manufacturing jobs. Some of the best manufacturing facilities we see in the United States with respect to aircraft parts, buses, plastics, machine tools, are in North Carolina. They're very productive and very successful. But they don't hire lower skilled and semi-skilled workers. They hire very, very skilled workers. For example, if you went to some of these manufacturing facilities, you would see many people operating computers that operate robots. That takes oftentimes a college education and computer literacy. It's an interesting challenge. So what we see is not only a change in the quantity of manufacturing jobs, but also the quality of those jobs. Second, what we do see in financial services and trade and transportation is a temporary loss in many jobs, but we do see over time an increase in demand for those services. But even as many of you realize, when you walk into a bank office and you approach that teller, it doesn't take you very long to figure out, oftentimes they have a college degree and they're computer literate. And so you're talking about a very skilled workforce in financial services. So I would say one of the interesting challenges we have is the structure of the labor force we have is not the kind of labor force we are looking towards what people want, what businesses want in the future. There's a mismatch. It's a critical mismatch. And I think many people in this audience probably recognize that. We also have a significant split in our society between urban and rural environments. Many of you are very familiar with the traditional mill that developed in many of our rural areas, manufacturing facilities that developed in many towns. And what we see in North Carolina is oftentimes that when that one mill goes down, it's truly devastating to that community. So what we're also seeing is not simply manufacturing or not simply financial services. What we're also seeing is an urban-rural split going on in our community, where rural communities are oftentimes far more dependent on a single manufacturing facility than what we would see otherwise. So the challenge, again, that we see, second, is with respect to education and preparing that workforce. We have a certain workforce in this state, but we see the dynamics are dictating
We need more college-educated, computer-literate workers, and we don't need the good old boys. We don't need the factory girls. And we recognize that our society's dynamics mean that our education dynamics have to change as well. Retraining, absolutely key. One of the core focuses of most of the community colleges we know about is on retraining workers for a different area, for a different set of skills, bringing people up to snuff. What we have seen in this state, certainly one of my great first impressions, is there has always been a tremendous emphasis on this state is what I would call elite education. People in this state are very proud of UNC Chapel Hill. They're very proud of NC State. They're very proud of Wake Forest. They're very proud of Duke. We do a good job in this state to produce elite education. What we don't do a good job is getting kids out of high school. Our high school graduation rate is below the national average. It's a very interesting society. Now put that education challenge with what we see in the job market. The job market's saying we don't need high school dropouts. That was good in the 1940s and 50s, all right? That was good in the 1960s to go into the factories. That's not what we need today. So I think that is, again, a real important distinction. And then finally, I would emphasize I think what many of you feel or know. We have made a lot of promises, and we don't have the resources to deliver on those promises. We see that in the state budget of North Carolina, and we certainly see it in the federal budget in the United States. And I think many of you that are pretty aware know that we certainly see it in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system and in the city of Charlotte. We have made a lot of promises to a lot of people, and we don't have the budget to deliver it. And that, again, is a huge challenge to our society. So I think when Michael talks about challenges, I do see challenges. I see an economy moving this way and a labor force that is structured this way. I do see, in terms of education, an ability to produce very good elite students and an inability to get kids out of high school. And then finally, I think one of our greater challenges is simply, looking at what we see in terms of what we've promised people and what we're realistically able to deliver. And closing that gap creates a lot of frustration and anger. And again, as I would see it, as I mentioned in Los Angeles, that's what we're here for. In a way to close that gap between the promises that people make and the inability of society to deliver them. And that's what I mentioned in Los Angeles, and I think, again, it's true for what we're talking about here today. Thank you.